televising the greatest sporting spectacles on earth. I've got the pleasure of introducing two phenomenal people to you momentarily. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Kim Rao. I'm Managing Editor of News Productions at ITN Productions, and I'm also Vice Chair of the Royal Television Society's Technology Centre. And along with my colleagues, Cara, Jenny, Mark, have facilitated this evening for you. And it gives me the greatest pleasure. I worked with Warren when we were all starting out in 2009, which feels like a lifetime ago. But he is now head of Sport and Factual at Box to Box Films. And he is going to be interviewed / interrogated by the lovely Pamela Cookey, who used to play for England at netball. And she has a vast array of strings to her bow. But before we get started, we want to take a quick look at the work that Box to Box do.
What makes the story great?
It is a big question. And it deserves a big answer.
Red flag, red flag.
Oh boy, here we go.
Always has to be heroes.
And the Grammy goes to Amy Winehouse.
Anti-heroes.
The most popular rock and roll band in Britain today.
What makes the story great?
The lottery of life.
We've been blessed with an era of greatness.
I don't know if I can stand this much excitement.
It's just a great time to be alive.
So it needed documenting. It's not gone with the wind, but there's probably more in there somewhere.
It was fucking biblical, man.
What a ledge, eh?
It wasn't all me. I can't say that.
Take the credit, take the
No,
credit.
I can't.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Warren. I'm very much looking forward to this and delving into some of the things that you've done, because there are some epic stuff. We've seen the video. As you say, you can't take the credit for everything, but you've played a massive part. Can you give us a little grand tour of your career to date?
So my career, obviously now Box to Box, we do a lot of sports documentaries and series, but I haven't always been in that sort of sports space. I started actually 20 years ago, is when my first job in television was, and I worked as a runner at ITV, so I was lucky enough to work out the gate on shows like The Parkinson Show and things like that. And actually at that point did get to work on the Champions League football for ITV at that stage, but back then, my job was to basically take the order from Andy Townsend and Ali McCoist and go and get them a curry and basically then get them a drink and whatnot and clean up after them. But obviously it gave me that insight into, an area of the industry that I'd really be keen to get into. And I didn't actually get back to there for another sort of like 15, 16 years. And obviously like many people in the industry, you sort of take the jobs that are available and you do those and hope that, I had a way of telling myself that everything I was doing would be the biggest thing, even if it was a terrible, terrible show. But I've worked on many, many shows, and as Kim touched on, we worked together at a company called 2-4 back in sort of those days, was down in the West Country, and sort of at that point you work on shows where you sink or swim, and you sort of chuck in, and you're a cameraman, you're a sound man, and you're everything. So I got the opportunity then to learn that, but I won't bore you with the entire sort of CV, but essentially went through and sort of worked my way up to direct, and had a sort of little dabble in making music videos and commercials, but essentially always came back to wanting to make sort of long form content in the unscripted space and sort of documentary series really. So I sort of pre-Box to Box, worked on the Educating series, which was, a big success for Channel 4, sort of looking at the school running, and then sort of through there into a few formats. We did a show called The Real Marigold Hotel, which was series director of, and then sort of landed on a big sort of show, which was SES Who Dares Wins, and sort of the creation of this celebrity sort of series, which now is obviously in the UK, but is in Fox in the US. Left there and then landed at Box to Box and have been there for over 4 years now. So we came in to show run initially on a series. And that series was the first series that they did after Drive to Survive, actually. It was Make or Break for Apple TV, and it was around the world of surfing. So did that, and then somehow did all right on that, was asked to stay, moved on to do multiple shows, did okay on that, and then was, become head of department a few years ago. So very, very lucky to work on a few of those things that we've seen here today.
Wow, amazing. We'll get on to this now. Let's go back just a little bit. Leona Lewis.
She's tipped you off. Yeah. No, I said I dabbled in music videos. So I did a Christmas video once for Leona Lewis.
The actual Christmas video.
The actual one that you see every Christmas, directed that, which is very different to exec producing on Full Swing. But, it's all telling stories and, content at the end of the day.
And also shows that there's no one specific, like your goal might be to get to where you are now, but you have to do so many varying different roles and jobs to put yourself in that position to be able to deliver when you get to that point.
I think the main thing that I feel is that, and one of the reasons I wanted to work in television is you want to entertain, right? You want people to watch what you do and go, I enjoyed that, and be moved in some form, whether that's a 3-minute music video at Christmas and my daughters think that's the coolest thing, or whether that's making a show like Formula 1 Drive to Survive or, Breakpoint Tennis, etc. So I think, for me, it's about storytelling and actually when we did those music videos, our style was all about can we do that reportage, capture those moments for real as if it was a bit of a documentary feel. So I feel there was a little bit of a synergy between those little mixed videos and or Leona Lewis and the stuff we do now, but maybe, not that close really.
So you're head of Sport and Factual at Box to Box.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the origins of Box to Box?
Yes, so you saw there's obviously a collection of the work, and I've got to say, obviously our founders, Paul Martin and James Gay Rees, have, laid those foundations. And I think James, initially I think the inception of Box to Box came via another company, but James worked on the Amy and won the Oscar for Amy Winehouse, and then did the Senna documentary. And I think that Senna documentary was, led the way for a number of other documentaries to come. It was one of the first archival based docs that really delved into a story that had already been told, but how can you tell it in a way that people had never heard and understand it from that perspective? And I think that evolution really, the seed of Senna then led into Drive to Survive, and I think initially the idea was to make 10 Sennas a season, but it was about who do you make the characters, and again, I can't take any credit for that, but essentially what the team did initially was to understand the world. And I think because of the respect that James had built from having worked with Formula 1 in the days of Bernie Ecclestone and the older regime before Liberty Media, he had the trust of them really to say, okay, these guys will look after us and they will do us a good job. And I think that then has led into me coming into the company, and we've over the last 4 or 5 years grown a slate of sports documentaries, which we're all very proud of, and touch on many areas, whether it's like a more of a niche sport like surfing, which I did initially, up to a sport like golf, and we're now in the US making a show on NHL and other big sports. So there's a big cross section there.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. You mentioned Drive to Survive, and I think for me, I'm watching it, that seems like a real turning point in sport documentary programming, and kind of really gave us that insight into Fly on the Wall. You're there, you're experiencing and seeing it all. But you also did SAS Who Dares Wins that you talked about, but also Towie, The Only Way is Essex.
I said I've had a weird career, but anyway, 20 years, a long time.
Such, like you said, so diverse, but they're all so engaging. What makes them so engaging?
I think I've touched on it earlier about entertaining people. You want the viewer to be interested, I think at the time it's about stories, and even those reality shows, and which now are hugely successful, under different titles in different worlds, whether Netflix selling Sunsets and whatnot. People want to know what people are really like, and I think that's what you try and do. You try and really show and get under the skin of people's lives, really, because that's what's interesting. And I think for a long time, sports wasn't. They didn't allow that door to be opened. It wasn't an opportunity. So I think we were always, and I was personally always interested in sort of reading the back pages of the newspapers, even back in the day, teletext, you'd want to know what was the story going on, all that type of stuff. But no one really got that opportunity. And I think Formula One Drive to Survive, and I know there's been a lot of other, iterations out there. There's been the All or Nothings, but I feel like, we as a company were one of the first ones really to truly get under the skin of the athletes and truly do it. Because I think the world that we live in now, everybody's media trained, everybody does that, but as it starts to build, there's the social media. So these athletes are doing their own things. They're doing. So then why not do it to a wider audience like Netflix and own your story? Because otherwise, the press, the pundits, everybody else is going to own your story for you. So why not, have you say yourself? And I think that's what a lot of those drivers initially did, and then that's led to golfers, tennis players, rugby players, jockeys. We're doing a show around that in the US. So so there's lots of that type of stuff.
Definitely. I think, in a way, when I used to play, really, what goes on tour stays on tour.
Yeah.
It was kind of my thing, but this also, almost in a way, takes a little bit about how much access do you have, and also to be able to build the trust with these world-class athletes, to allow your production teams to be able to go in and be so close and personal with them. That must take some doing.
Yeah, I think sort of the key thing for us is building a great team, because essentially it's not going to be all me that builds trust at every level. So you need to make sure that sort of the directors are brilliant at what they do, the sound team are great, et cetera, because you need to build a level of trust, and that doesn't happen initially. And I think sort of, that builds up. And a lot of the times when we turn up, we won't even have a camera. We'll want to, when we first go into a world, we want to build that trust and just make people realise that we're okay. But we've done weird things where, like, we'll go and be in the hotel around people in the morning to make sure that they know that we're there, and, that we obviously work alongside people like IMG, but we try sometimes to sort of be different and sort of make sure that it feels like they're giving us different intel or different information than maybe they would to the live broadcaster. And I think that's key. So trust, as you touched on, is a massive thing, and that comes from the top, whether it's building the trust with the organisation or whether it's an individual athlete, and that's about a producer-director character. In the UK, we obviously have the producer-director, which also shoots as well. So it's quite a small unit. So it's about not turning up a truck with lights and cameras and all of that. It's a very, very, intimate team that we use, that we do now in our shows here and in the US, to make sure that we can build that trust over time, so that when they are willing to open up, they do it to us.
Yeah. Do you kind of have someone already that in those sports, or you have those key connections that makes it easier to get your foot in the door, or is it you're coming from it cold and then you're building this trust and spending time with them so that you almost become one of the team in a way?
Look, we're big. I mean, most of the people that work at Box to Box are big sports fans, but I think one of the things is you don't want to be sort of an uber fan that's like, just about, around the celebrities and all of that type of stuff, and there's Rory McIlroy and there's Tiger Woods, etc. So I think there's a real balance to play there. A lot of, the success of Drive to Survive obviously has brought a lot of opportunity for us as a company, because a lot of the other organisations want that themselves. We really want that Drive to Survive effect, whether that's, the fact that, viewing figures have gone up hugely for the live, not everybody puts it down to that, but it's got to play a part with the Netflix show. So I think sort of when that comes, a lot of incoming comes, well, we would like that for our sport. So that gives us the opportunity to have then. But then when you get on the ground, we spend a lot of time with our teams building that relationship. And sometimes that just comes with an initial conversation without a camera, where you build up and you understand, well, what do you want your story to be? People think it's that. What do you want? And then eventually they understand that actually we're there to sort of tell their story, rather than to be a gotcha and say, right, we're going to find this out about you and put it on Netflix, and you've got no, say in that. We want you to own your story, so that in a year's time, when you watch it on TV, or less than that, you can say, that was what it was like. You captured, whether it be the Olympics or whether it be your personal story, you've captured it, and that's felt right. So giving them a voice allows them to do that, where sometimes in other mediums of sports, production, you can't do that, because it's instant, it's in the moment, it's live, it's done, and anybody's voice is done in the post-match interview, whereas we give them an opportunity to say, well, this is actually how I was feeling in that moment, so that the viewer that gets it on an Apple, Amazon, Netflix, they feel that.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a real partnership with them, so you almost doing it in tandem together. It's not you're competing, we're going to show it. It's like, well, how can we work together to highlight the sport and the individual in the best light?
When it works well, that's what we want. Sometimes it's harder. You were an athlete, so you know that sort of when, you know, the main thing that you know is that when you're at a sporting event, the number one goal for them is winning that sporting event. It isn't doing a Netflix show or whatever. So I think we have to tread that line really carefully and understand when a no is a no and when a no is maybe it is a yes. And that's the balance that our teams walk daily.
Yeah. So I just went like, when I was captain, you want the team to kind of be able to experience the whole environment and the atmosphere because that's what's give you energy to play. But you also need that focus on you're up against the world's best. You've got to deliver your job first.
Yeah.
But then also, it's entertainment in the end. We want people to come to the games. You want people to see the massive show and like Drive to Survive. I wanted an Aston Martin after watching that. Like, I'm in now.
Me too.
So it is that kind of like working together. But then how do you capture those like pivotal moments where the athlete is like 100% focused on delivering their sport and for the outcome of the win, but those nuances that allows them to be the person that they are, to also be that athlete?
I can't give away the secrets, all of them, because everybody will do it. But no, I think the key thing is, you know, again, it's building the trust so that athlete knows that when they're around. I think Noah Lyles was a perfect example because Noah is obviously someone that, you know, lives off of an energy and he wants that. He wants to be the number one. And when we came in to do the series, we do so for Netflix called Sprint. And when we came into that series and we started having those conversations and doing all the sort of the initial meetings and what we would call a taster tape to sell to Netflix, do you want this world? He wasn't even really in the sort of conversation. He was a 200-metre runner. Obviously, in Noah's head he was. But in the conversation around the world, he wasn't. There was a few other people. There was a guy called Bromell that was actually Trayvon Bromell that was the number one guy going to think, yeah, he hasn't even never featured in the series because that's how the world moves. But Noah just lived on that way of giving us and wanting us in. So, you know, perfect example is allowing us in during the, you know, the preparation for the 100 metres. You know, we were so close to him. And I felt that energy, and I was there on the shoot. Don't get to go to all the shoots, but I was there, and you just feel like he loves being the man, and you know that sort of drives an energy in him. Not everybody's like that. Some people want that sort of personal touch. I think Formula One is a great opportunity because they already had microphones in helmets, microphones on the team principals. So there's elements of that. I think sound is so key to feeling like you're in the moment, you know, because obviously live sport does such a brilliant job of capturing the moment visually. And I think what we try and do is utilise sound as well. And I think that's the key. Sometimes people have already got that shot, but they didn't know what they were saying to each other. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I feel like we've been able to elevate. I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but that's, you know, that's how I feel, really.
No, totally. And before we move, one last question on that, but you talk about like Noah Lyles and he's this big personality and almost he wants the attention and whatnot. When you're do you pick certain characters that are like a Noah Lyles, or do you kind of just go with the flow and you might just get a gem from?
No, I think you've got to lean into who wants to be involved. I think the worst thing you can do is try and force story with someone that just doesn't want it. Yeah. You know, and we've had that on, you know, a few series where, you know, there's players in golf, whatever, they're like, just don't film me. Yeah. You know, we feature that in the show. It's quite funny, but you know, there's characters like Gunther in Formula One, or you know, Joel Damon in our Full Swing show. They are amazing characters and really gave themselves up. You know, they weren't going to win the race or win the tournament, but they had a human story. You know, especially Joel Damon. You know, he was a sort of on the cusp, but they had a personal narrative with his caddy. They'd been to school together, and sometimes those stories are as important as the winners. And I think Formula One Drive to Survive, the one thing that, you know, really set that apart, I think, at the beginning is it wasn't just the story of the winner. The first season, you know, the team that worked on it didn't have Ferrari and Mercedes. They didn't sign up. They were like, we're going to see how this plays out. It's probably going to go away. People have tried and failed. And I think sort of Paul and James said, you know, the first call after the season drop was from Mercedes and Ferrari saying, we're in for season 2. So I think sort of that stuff, but that allowed the shows to understand that, you know what, winners' stories aren't always the best narratives. Sometimes sort of making that sort of, you know, getting into the top 10 in a tournament, or, you know, that sort of near loss, you know, that is almost as enthralling and entertaining as sort of who came first and second.
Yeah. it makes the athletes that we like put on this pedestal, it makes them human. And
Yeah.
we can kind of relate to them more so.
Yeah.
Because we get this insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to do, just to humanise people, because I think athletes are humans at the end of the day. They all had a dream, and they, a lot of people become media trained and whatever, but they just want to be themselves. And I think that's what we try and capture, the real them. If the world's cameras are looking that way, we're trying to see what's going on over here with them when they're having those quiet moments.
Yeah, love that. OK, let's talk logistics. So you talked about being at the National World Championships for athletics, being at the Olympics. How do you get all that kit, all those teams into these prestigious venues?
Yeah, I mean, we have an amazing production team that do a lot of that type of stuff. I mean, the thing that we do is a lot of our stuff, we work with IMG, we work with all of these other big organisations that capture, the events. We don't put in 66 cameras to film Formula One. Why would we? Because they already film it really well. So we would utilise footage that way, but then we would then elevate the narrative capture, so we'll be following the story. So then we'll have sort of more intimate, sort of 3, 4, 5 cameras at an event, depending on what that is, and then those crews. So it is a logistical sort of, travelling circus, but it isn't like the team that work behind, the live of Formula One that have got to like move hundreds and hundreds of cameras and sort of OB trucks and things like that. So, on some of our shows, like Tour de France Unchained, because that travels across the entirety of France, and you can't say, can you just wait there, we're just going to catch up. There is an OB truck, but most of the time we do that. Some shows we utilise technology like Hawkeye, where they already capture. I mean, I had the moment once where I was on a shoot trying to work out how we were going to cover golf. Literally 18 holes, however many players, and we were in a truck, and we looked for a window, and there was cameras on every, and I was like, what are they doing? Oh, that's called Hawkeye, and they do every shot, every hole for the red button. And I was like, can we speak to them? And then you have those conversations and you work out, well, actually, if they're already doing it, can we utilise that technology? So I think sometimes there's that type of thing. So it is a huge operation going to the Olympics, going to Formula One races, and I wouldn't want to dampen anybody that's working on the show. They do an amazing job. But I think those, the feeling that we're doing everything, we're not.
So there's a lot of collaboration.
Collaboration's key
Yeah.
in all of this, yeah.
Definitely. So go on that technology point of view, so you brand these documents kind of like the premium series, and so there's an expectation that we're going to get some good stuff. And all the equipment and what that you use, how do you ensure that you capture those amazing visuals, the sound quality that really, because we want to feel it, don't we? And it's all about the sights and sound, getting all our senses out there. How do you go about making sure you have the right technology to be able to do that?
I think sound is massively key, because essentially, as I touched on, like, people are going to see it, but you don't hear what's going on. So we're constantly thinking about, we're doing a series this year, the Isle of Man TT, and trying to put microphones on the bikes for the first time with the riders, because no one's really ever had that, And we did a surfing series, and we're like, well, how can we get mics in the water? Because no one's seen going through a barrel and sort of hearing the sort of, the beef, I suppose, between them. Like, everybody thinks it's tranquil surfing, but it's not. They're actually fighting out there. So that's it. So I think sound and the sound team do it. So we're always thinking about where can we put mics, and if it's a sport that, the governing bodies aren't going to allow it. Rugby's brilliant already because there's already the ref's already on a mic, and we're like, well, can we get that? And then all of a sudden you're realising you're getting Joe Marler on a mic, and you're getting all these players hearing these things, and obviously in the live they're only cutting to it for a moment. We're able to see, right, here's the 90 minutes of the ref mic. What can we use? And, in that moment, what was being said? So I think we're always utilising that. I think, depending on what sport, technology's important. The series directors do a great job. I think Lord Coe, I'm going to name drop, but he said to us, the one thing that I feel that you did in sprint was captured speed in the way that it's never really been captured. And I just think that's just the way in which the positions of the cameras, how close they are to the athletes, because a lot of sports coverage, and especially track and field, is high-angled cameras, following it around. But if you're in there and the shutter speed of the camera is slightly different, I'm not going to get into the details. I did direct once, so we're going to be that now. But, you can really capture speed in a way, tracking with the athlete. And I think that's something that our teams did a really, really good job on that show, for sure, to sort of really go, okay, well, what does Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price really look like when she's running top-end speed? And I think we managed to do that.
Yeah, you definitely did. Those can't even pronounce it, technological advancements. So like you say about the microphones when they're in the barrel of the waves, is there any other things that are coming out that you're really excited about that you want to try going forward?
I think that's what I mean, look, we're always looking for what we can do. I think sound, I can't understand, and this is for anybody out there, I haven't got this, but how a spy can have like a microphone tiny and plug. But in TV, we need to wire and whatever. It doesn't quite work out for me. So I keep saying, like, let's try to look for innovations in sound. What can we do in that way? But then, the cameras, we try and work stripping back our cameras. We work in the UK, US, around the world, and making sure that when our teams turn up, we try and strip it back. Because I think, as you've seen with our stuff, it's trying to have that intimacy with an athlete. And there's nothing worse than having, like, a massive camera on your shoulder with a map box and banging into someone, and you need a producer in the back to produce because the cameraman's just operating the camera. So I think, like, for us, we have a brilliant, crew of freelancers and staff that do a great job of being able to do multiple jobs. I think that is the world we live in, but also being able to do it, brilliant cameras, but stripped back, so that if you are in that moment with an athlete, it doesn't feel like you're, intrusive. You're sort of very much intimate with that. And I think that's down to how the camera's set up as much as the camera, because obviously the quality of camera is sometimes set by the broadcaster. They'll say, right, this needs to be the spec, this is it, and there's only so many that you can actually do. So I think a lot of it is how the operator works with that equipment.
Yeah, I think you hit that intimacy.
Yeah.
You really do get that. Have there been any moments where that have been a bit hairy and you've had to stop filming, or you've been told to stop filming, that you can share with us?
I think there's lots of different times. I think one of my first experience was my first shoot for Box to Box. We went to Hawaii, and James and Paul were talking to me about, or something. We just went for dinner before the first day's shooting. They went, something always happens on a Box to Box show. First episode of Drive to Survive, nothing was happening. It was a boring race, and then the wheels all fell off a car, and it just like crashed. And they were like, right. So I woke up in the morning, and I shouldn't laugh because it's not funny, but there was a shark attack, and you're thinking, what the hell? Like, and it's unfolding in front of your eyes, and obviously then you have to be respectful of like the sort of family and things like that. So obviously you couldn't film that, but you can film everything that's sort of happening beyond that. And, so there's been that where there's sort of, out of our control, non-sport, but the playing field is the ocean, and you can't do anything about sharks in the ocean, right? And obviously, the COVID, period, there's been times when you're sort of, you can't go here, you've got to keep separation here. So then working out technologies about how you can capture things during that period was important. And then, at the Olympics with Noah, he collapsed at the end of the 200-metre line, and there was periods where we took him through, and then it was like, stop here, can't go through him. We want to go through because that's the good stuff in there. So, you have to work, but, you have to respect your partners to not do that, So, yeah, so there's been times like that. So, from that moment down to there. So it's sort of, but even, you saw in that clip, Man on Fire, you've got to be able to tell those stories. And people want to know what's really going on because they've seen it on the live broadcast. So they want to know, well, what really happened? What was his wife thinking? What was what was he going through? So to be able to capture that, and that episode where, you have a husband and wife sitting down next to each other in the interview post with his hands in bandages, it's an amazing moment of, like we said earlier, humanising an athlete and making it realise, this is real. He's got a wife, he's got kids, and this was actually his life that was on the line there. And I think that's something that we've, been lucky enough to capture, and then obviously viewers to watch.
To get to see, indeed, yeah. So right, back to me. When we used to go on tour, we'd kind of, everyone like, you're going to Jamaica, you're going to South Africa, going to New Zealand and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing, but I kind of see the hotel, the airport and the arena that we're playing in. Some of your socials, we've seen you on the finish line of the Olympics, you've been on golf courses. Is it glitz and glamour in your world?
It's exactly the same. You go hotel, plane, hotel, back, time zone, whatever, you do it. But you can't... it's a dream job, right? It's like, I'm a sports fan at heart, and to be able to go to all these sports events, you can't deny that. So I'm not going to sit here saying it's terrible, but you know, you don't get always, you know, you're not in the luxury places some of these athletes are, right? And you see on the show. So, you know, I think you have to weigh that up. But you know, it's tough, because also our job is always pushing and striving for more. And you know, as many of you might know, but like, you know, you definitely know, athletes don't always want you around. So our job is always about like, how can we, we thought we were doing that, but we're not doing that. What are we going to do? How are we going to move that? So there's so many moving pieces. You know, any one time, you know, I think we've got, you know, nearly 20 shows at the moment, and you've got all those different problems that are happening, you're facing, so you're trying to deal with that, and you only really hear about it when there's a problem, right? Yeah. In my job now, so it's sort of like you're firefighting, you're trying to work those things out, and you know, so I think, so yeah, it is glitz and glamour, and I've got to say, like, being on the final finish line of 100 metres, I mean, the IOC were great partners, and when we went into there, they were very much like, these are your areas, you've got to stand on that X marks box to boxes spot. And we were like, have you seen our light shows before? Like that, that's not how it works. And they were like, everything takes time and build trust, and you know, and build respect, and you'll be fine. And eventually, as you can see in the show, like, we were everywhere, and we got there. But you know, they were very much sort of like working with us to open up those doors in the end. But you know, there's time. You've got to work around, and how you can't just go in and be gung ho. Yeah. But but in terms of glamour, yes, it is glamour, because they were like, and by the way, you're on the 100-metre finish line. Any volunteers? And I was like, me, I'll do it.
Pushing everyone else aside. Yeah. Amazing. You said over like 20 shows we're working on at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit more about the ones that are upcoming? So, for example, I know you're working with Matchroom, with Eddie and Barry Hearn, like greats in terms of the whole kind of doing deals and whatnot. And also Simon Needs You.
Yeah, we're doing a music show, we're not very sport. But yeah, I mean, touching on the Matchroom piece, it was something that I was really, like, personally passionate about. And again, Paul and James both love boxing, and we started talking to them about a boxing series a couple of years ago, and I think sort of the buyers of the world were like, well, you know, where is boxing at? You know, what else is there? And you know, they would go, and we did a few taster tapes, and then all of a sudden, like last year, darts blows up, Luke Littler effect, and it's crazy, and I'm watching it on TV, and I'm thinking, they're saying that Matchroom own darts, and I didn't even realise. So then I speak to, you know, Frank Smith and Eddie Hearn. Oh, yeah, we do darts, we do snooker, and we do pool, and we do that. And then you start thinking, wait a minute, this is like a proper British success story at Barry Hearn, you know, starting off from a snooker hall in Romford and now pretty much £1 billion company. So we started talking to them, and then, you know, that piqued the interest of Netflix. They've announced it, so I can say. So we're following it, but it's much more around the business of sport. So you feature the athletes, you know, Ronnie O'Sullivan's in it, we've got AJ, we've got Luke Littler, so you've got the, you know, the biggest names, but it's like, what does it take to put on those events, and how does it take to do the deals, right? And Eddie, and things go well, things don't go quite so well, you know, there's personal narratives. So I'm really excited for that to land, and I think that's going to come out sort of around about sort of possibly sort of middle to end of this year, so that'll be quite exciting.
Yeah, those two, like, but the whole of Matchroom and that setup, it's real global domination that they're looking for, isn't it? And do we get to see that?
They're going for it, yeah. I mean, they say in their interview, you know, not global domination, but fucking-lutely global domination. They're like, literally, they want to go hard. But that's it. They're sort of, you know, they're competitors, right? They treat their business like sport, and that's why they're good at it. So it's great to have that, they're marrying up sport in business with actual sport as well, and they're just brilliant characters. And they've really featured on their own show before, which it was crazy. There's been bits and pieces with Barry Hearn, but there's that thing now. You know, what does he do? Does he ever retire? Does he hand it over? So it's a bit of a succession narrative. You know, what's the next steps for Matchroom, really? Yeah.
Do you think he'll ever retire, though?
No. Spending a little bit of time around him, the guy's never retiring.
There we go. No. Let's switch a bit. So over the years, like, I've had some amazing mentors that have kind of been that industry guiding light or had that support to, like, help further development. Has there been anyone in your life that has kind of fulfilled that role or given you that support?
I think I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of very, very good people, and you take elements. I've tried to take bits from everybody. Do you know what I mean? And the good and the bad. You know, the bits where you're like, oh, I wouldn't do that, but you know, I would do that. So I tried to do that. I mean, I think sort of you know, once you go freelance, it's quite hard to have that mentor, because essentially you're job to job to job, and you're only as good as your last job. So you're more worried about sort of how you're doing rather than like, can you give me, well, I was anyway, like how. But started my career, there was a guy in Plymouth called Chris Williams who was basically did mentor me, and it was essentially like, I'm not sure if it would be allowed now, but it was like, it was hard love. It was like, okay, if you want to do this, your job is a researcher, but you want to learn camera, okay, we'll be up tomorrow morning and be at the beach at 6 o'clock. The first day I turned up, 6:05, and he went, back to the room. You missed it. So the next morning I'm up at 5:45, not going to miss it. But you know what I mean, you learn those lessons. And he was really good. I remember there was one time where I was actually telling someone the other day, he said, can you shoot? I was like, yeah, I can shoot, yeah. Have you shot on a particular camera? I was like, yeah, and I hadn't. And obviously it was terrible. And he brings me into the edit, and he looks at he said, what's that? It's all out of focus. He said, don't ever fucking say that you can film again, but we're going to teach you how to film. So I think that sort of tough love has always been something that I remembered now. That's 18 years ago now. So I think it's sort of stuck with me. So I always remember that, and obviously a lot of respect for him for doing that. And then as you move through, you then sort of, as I say, you're in the role of, researcher, AP, director, so you're looking up and thinking, well, what are they doing? What can I learn from them and the skills? And I think, to be honest, like working at Box to Box, to bring it back to us, I think what James and Paul do, they're very impressive. You soak up, you're like a sponge. You're like, right, okay, how are they persuading this organisation that it's a good idea to let cameras into dressing rooms? And you're thinking, well, yeah, actually, but that makes sense. We should be doing that. And then you're taking that information and moving on. So I think, I wouldn't say they're my mentor, they're my bosses, but I definitely take elements from them. I'll never be them because I'm a very different character, but you take elements from what they do, and you hopefully, pass that into what you do, and then the team that you sort of oversee.
Yeah, that's so. To reverse it then, you've learnt stuff. Your career. I've then been in positions where it's kind of like giving back to the next generation, and that ability to kind of help. And you think, well, I'm too young. I'm not there at my, obviously look very young, at that stage in my career yet where I can. But they say it's so valuable. You look very young too. Do you feel you're at a stage where you can also give that guidance to those coming up?
Yeah, I think sort of, what I loved about starting at Box to Box, it was that they weren't set up like a sort of regular TV company. I came from a very sort of, I had lots of different things, but very sort of structured TV world where you did this and there's that person. And they were Box to Box were very good at saying, right, if you can do it, go and do it. And I think that's something that I'm trying to sort of do with our team. Is like, okay, if you've got an idea, come with the idea. It doesn't matter that you're, assistant producer or researcher or whatever. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea, right? And we're going to talk about it and we're going to try and make it. And I think that's testament that we try and do. And that we have, we have a team we have lots of freelancers, but, there's people that have been there, and we're sort of are growing within the company that came in at certain roles. And because I think when you learn skills, I think Drive Side is a perfect example. Like, that show's very hard to make, Full Swing, very hard to make. So you want to keep that knowledge. You want to basically grow that knowledge, and then next year they grow that knowledge, and then they pass down. So I think it's very important to keep a core team, because they look easy to make, but they're really, really hard. And, the team on those shows, they're on the road, at pretty much every event, away from home. They work hard hours. So you want to reward them with, here's another series, and what else can we do together? And if you've got any ideas. So I think nurturing is very, very important for us as a company, for sure.
Yeah. How do you go about creating that environment where everyone can, like, what we see is such top quality, and to be able to, like you say, you're traveling all over, you're having to do back-to-back days, you're having to make sure that every day you turn up and you're ready to go and work. How do you create that culture where all of your team live by the examples that you want to set?
Look, I think we all have good and bad days, but I think the fact is you try and sort of, no one gets out of bed and wants to be bad at what they do, right? And I think for us it's that. I think complacency is sometimes the problem. It's like, if you're on a season, it's how do you keep that energy up over a full year? Because a lot of these shows that we do are pretty much year things. So you've got to make sure that at some point there's a new energy coming in that's like, right, what are we doing? Oh, our access doesn't work there, you know, and it's teammates helping each other. It is, you know, we almost do work our shows like sports teams, and it's like, you know, you had to go there, you couldn't get that access, it doesn't matter, but we'll try with this person, and that goes up the chain. I was speaking today to another show, it's like, why didn't I know that happened? Because you told me that I can have a go, and if I can't have a go, maybe Netflix can have a go. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of working and pulling to each other's strengths. So I think, and we sort of have a bit of a competitive energy in the company, that the fact that, like, you know, Drive to Survive is, you know, been there for 7 seasons now. Everybody wants to have the biggest Netflix rating. So, you know, the team on the golf show will be trying, the Tour de France show will be trying, you know, they're all trying their own ways to improve their shows so they can, you know, that bar stays as high as possible. And, you know, who am I to stop that? I mean, it's great to sort of get that sort of competitive energy between the showrunners and the team.
Indeed, amazing. Last question for me before I open up to you lovely people. If you could give one piece of advice to someone in the industry or looking to be part of it all, what would that be?
What, from the beginning of their career coming in?
We'll do both. Beginning of the career coming in, and then now where you are, how do you stay and still keep pushing forward?
I think sort of coming in, I think don't be too proud to accept a job just to be in the industry, right? I've worked on some, I'd never say terrible, but some things where, you know, questionable shows that you look back and you think, well, I did that. But essentially, you were working and you were learning and you were doing. And I think for me, sometimes there's an aspiration. I want to work in sports documentaries, so I'm going to wait and I'm going to hold my moment to get into sports documentaries. That may never come. You know, by the time you're waiting, the sport documentary might have moved on and we're now on music documentaries, right? So I think take any opportunity that you can, because essentially, you're still making TV. And I think that's really important, to be doing something, be creative and be storytelling and thinking about, right, how do I do it? Because I think if you can tell a story in a school in Manchester, you can tell a story in a paddock in, you know, Monaco. So I think it's really key to be honing those skills and not just thinking, right, I'm going to wait to do the, you know, the next Senna, you know, because that opportunity might not come and that's passed you by. So I would say just grab any opportunity that you can and be the absolute best you can, because I think, you know, there's a lot of people that want to work in this industry, and unfortunately at the moment I don't think the industry has a huge amount of opportunities out there. So if you get that foot in the door, take it and prove yourself, so no one's going to let you go out the door.
No. Say yes and then be the best.
Say yes and then be the best. Yeah, there you go, here you go.
And I guess that would be the same advice you'll give to yourself at this moment.
I think you can't ever rest on your laurels. You can never be sort of, right, yeah, we've done it. Because I think, you know, we're always there. And, you know, you're only as good as your last show. And I think that's the thing for me, is making sure that you can continue to keep up that drive to be like, right, this series needs to be better than the last, because essentially you're beholden to the networks and the streamers, and, you know, are they going to take a series again, whatever. So I think you've got to make sure that you leave them without a doubt. They have to take another series because it's brilliant, and I think that's the only way that sort of will drive you to sort of continue to do it. And also looking for the innovation, like what's next. I mean, I think James did a great job, and Paul, like in terms of there's Senna, now here's Drive to Survive, but what's next? And we're always looking for that, because there's always an evolution and for what the, you know, audiences want to watch.
Things move so fast these days now, isn't it? You just can't afford to stay still.
No, completely.
Oh, thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
So, evening. Anyone got some questions for the lovely Warren? Yes, straight in.
Hi, Warren.
Oh, sorry, bear with me. We've got a microphone.
Hello, thank you. Very interesting, thank you both. I've got 2 questions, if I could be greedy. One is, how, as a sports fan, do you not get distracted when something amazing's happening? Like 100-metre final, obviously, it's a greatest show on earth. But to keep your team focused on the story that they're doing, you know, the team might not be with Noah Wiles at that point, but how do you not get distracted and go, oh my God, this is an amazing piece of history, sporting event? And my second question is, what is the balance of on-screen females to male-screen females that you work with, and what's that like at the crew side? What's the male-female
So the first
balance?
point is, I think the focus is, a lot of our teams are following an individual. So what's brilliant is because they'll be, you'll have a director there and he'll be on Noah. You'll have another director there, Richard is on Shane Thompson. So when they come together and it's like, who's got that moment? They're feeling that moment for those individuals together. And, my job at that point is to be sort of, on that day in particular, to be the what's it called, conductor, to say, right, you on that shot, you can, you don't need to all be on the same thing because we were in the stadium and we could only see. We were on the thing, actually. But the reality is that those moments. But you can get taken. I mean, the Ryder Cup last year was unbelievable, and we made that show with a mainly a US team, and but we brought on I was like, right, we're going to do it properly, and we're going to have US in the US camp, and we're going to have Brits, Europeans in the European camp, and we're going to properly attack.
Nice.
And obviously for me and the exec team, it was me versus the Americans, and I was buzzing. So I was properly in it. It was an amazing experience. But you do have to separate yourself at times and go, right, check yourself. We've still got a TV show
It's
to
the
make.
winning shot to make sure you've got your winning shot on
camera. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the key. And also understanding that, like, what's often important isn't that winning moment, it's the moments afterwards that make our show special. So making sure that you've actually thought ahead, so you're not in the scrum of the moment. You actually go, well, actually, you know what? That moment's going to get captured by 1,000 cameras in that stadium, so we're sort of covered there. But what's not going to be captured is the bit here when that person comes out crying their eyes out because they haven't quite achieved their dream. And I think that's the thing for that. And in terms of the other story, I think across our shows, I think we do have a balance. I think when you look at our sort of the surfing show, the Breakpoint, the shows that do have a female-male opportunity, we 100% will cover that. And I think, I think Sprint's a perfect example. The female cast in that, personally, I mean, not saying anything against the male cast, I think they make that show because they're just such great characters, and you just feel their sort of energy, and they talk like fighters, they're like boxers, and it's just awesome. I think sort of in terms of the crew, absolutely. Like from our showrunners down, through production, we do try and have a complete mix of production and sort of editorial team, that male, female, because I think it's important. There's certain sports where a male can't go in a female dressing room and a female can't go in a male dressing room. We have to make sure that that's covered. And also just work, who's going to get that best interview out of that person. That is all thought through. And, I've got a brilliant, team of execs that I work with who there's a good balance there of male, female. And I think that's really, really key. So, like, in terms of, the joke, we've had brilliant teams on Drive to Survive that have then gone on to, like, other shows and sort of done that. And, there's a definite mix across the board that I think we're proud of.
That's technically representative as well, female in technical roles.
Oh, in terms of camera work as well, yeah, absolutely. Actually, we had a funny story. So when we did Full Swing, we've got she's a Brit that lives in LA called Mary, and she's so adamant about working. She was pregnant. She was like 8 months pregnant, and we were like, "You can't work. No, you can't tell me what I can do. I can work." So she sat in the locker room, the champions locker room at the US Open golf, with literally the camera on her belly, and you've got John Rahm and Rory McIlroy. Mary, you're meant to be here. Like, where are you going? Like, they're coming up to the team going, are you allowing this to happen? And you're like, she's like, I want to be here because I'm not going to. I've done this show for 2 years. I'm going to miss this moment. So obviously it's her choice, but we wouldn't discriminate against that for sure.
Nice. And just because you didn't have the mic, it was about whether there was in the technical roles the same diversity. Anyone else? Question at the back. Thank you.
Hi there, Kieran Doran here. I work at the other end in the terms of getting this exciting content like Tour de France Unchained to the end viewers. But I'm curious about being the technology centre, RTS. What piece of technology has been most exciting for you in recent years? And what would you dream of beside that really full spectrum spy microphone that you mentioned earlier?
I just think, look, I think footage capture is really, really important. I think one of the things that we've learned is that not every sport has an archive base like Formula One. I think we came into that sport and Formula One had got it locked down, and they sort of everything, they don't understand. And we go into these sports, and I would wish there was an easier way to sort of capture footage without it being either in an OB truck. Obviously there's lots of opportunities, but every sport does it in a different manner. And obviously we have to work with the individual sports and the rights holders of those sports. For me, if there was a one-stop shop for sucking up everything, because there's some sports that, their job is to, but think about, well, the thing for going to golf was, well, we don't keep it because Why would we keep 18 shots times how many players, times how many days, times that on every tournament, whereas we need those moments. So we had to really work then with Hawkeye to think, well, how can we do that? And we have done that, but I think it could be really useful to have that technology at times to think, right, actually, how do we do that footage capture? Because it can be very, very costly when you've got to do that, whether it's in tennis, you know, and you've got to go to the US Open and say, we need every shot of every match. And they're like, well, that's going to cost you X amount. So I think there's got to, that technology for me would make my life a lot easier, making sure that I know that every moment's captured so that we've got the option in the edit would be good.
How do you, so if you have all this information, but then someone needs to go through it and pick it out. So that's crazy.
Teams of people, yeah.
Yeah.
Busy.
Busy indeed.
Yeah.
Question.
Hi there. As yet untapped or kind of out there sport that you'd like to cover? Tiddlywinks? What is there that hasn't been done yet?
Netball.
Netball. Netball. We need to do netball. We need to get into netball. I think sort of there's, look, sport is the option. I think there's a lot of evolving sports as well. Like there's sports now, you look at the NBA and then the Unrivaled series that's recently come through where there's a 3v3. I mean, there's opportunities there in Wales of how the evolution of like sort of traditional sports moving into non-traditional elements that would be good for television. I think sort of, you know, most sports are captured. I'd like to do more in the football space. Obviously that's the dream sport, but I think we should be doing more in football. Obviously, we've made the Maradona and the Gerrard and the Ronaldo documentaries, but I think that was a while ago, and I think we want to be doing more in that space. But there's anything, the world's the oyster, whether it's chess, poker, we're looking at everything. Oh, trust me, we're looking at them.
I'd just like to go back to the trust area. Professional sport is full of complicated commercial arrangements, whether they be technology in motor racing, where, a bit like working with the military, they ask you not to point the camera at that bit. And in terms of team sports, commercial awareness with partners is quite sensitive, and some people have quite big brands there that they might be concerned about things that might show their brand on someone effing and blinding in the changing room would not be what they want. How do you deal with those sort of areas?
The brand involvement, we don't have any dealings really. I mean, they don't have any review rights or anything. I mean, it's the operation of the team. I think we're about, I mean, look, I think the authenticity is key for our shows, right? The moment we take censorship from a brand saying you can't put that on because essentially they're swearing is a problem in that sports show, because it's that is a moment that we've captured. So for me, that's important that we keep that authenticity. And I think, you know, the partners that we work with, you know, they don't mind. It's, you know, we're not being censored and saying, right, can you sort of delete this brand out of here, whatever. So I think on that, what was the first point on that?
About technology sensitivities, you know.
Yeah, I mean, IP.
The Formula One car. Or...
The IP issue is whether it's a line out, you know, and the intellectual property of like, how do we work a line up? We have those conversations. And actually, this is a perfect example. You know, we moved into the rugby space. You know, there was a coach that was, you know, well, wait a minute, this is the way I do my scrum and line. I don't want the world knowing that. We're like, well, wait a minute, we're not giving away what Red Bull's engine's like for Mercedes, so we're not going to do it with that. And I think, to be honest, in our shows, I think we are aiming at the sports fan, but we're also trying to bring in the non-sports fan. And I think sometimes that sort of inside baseball phrase, I suppose, is like, if it's too detailed on the sort of the IP, then you're going to lose the viewers. So we're more about the personal and human stories, and that allows us not to then get too much in the sort of day-to-day detail of an engine setup, or, you know, the golf club shaft, whatever they're using. Do you know what I mean? So I think we try and steer away from that a little bit, and therefore that allows us to then go into other organisations and say, look, what we've done in Formula One for 7 years, we've never given away a trade secret. We're not going to do that in your sport. So that builds the trust.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I was encouraged by a colleague to watch Full Swing. I've got zero interest in golf, but my wife and I were completely transfixed and binge watched it all. It was so compelling as a human story. However, the reason I was told to watch it by the colleague was because it was a good example of bad standards conversion. It looked like it was delivered at 24 frames a second, but all the broadcast footage that's presumably 60 hertz kind of originated, you know, when there were certain camera pans up to look at the golf kind of shot, it's very jerky and very juddery, and the golf swings sometimes were very jerky, very juddery. And I don't know if you have had to address that. Do you deliver at 24 frames a second?
That show's delivered
Mixing
out of
that footage seems
that show's delivered out of the US. So essentially, there'll probably be something there. Maybe that I don't know if that was season 1, season 2, or both. So I think I can have a word with them. Not my department. Not my department. I'm going to talk to Rich and Tom about that.
My colleague.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we can look at that. I think sort of some of it is when it's all about footage capture as well, and in the moment and what it was like at capture. I think sort of potentially there's an opportunity there about, you know, what it was captured in versus what the documentary of doc footage is captured and how that works together. But we are in final post of season 3, so I'll take that. To them now.
Good. Some feedback you're getting in.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll have to talk to you after.
At the back, thank you.
Hi, thanks a lot. I promise I won't ask this on behalf of my daughter, who's a massive fan of Drive to Survive, but I'll ask the question anyway. I'm just take you back to the origin story of Drive to Survive. What came first? Did Netflix approach you? Do you go to Netflix, say, we've got this great show, great idea, and you said that in the early seasons you didn't have Ferrari and Mercedes, for instance. Was that sort of, where did you have that sort of go, no-go situation? Because I don't think I'd have gone for it without those two main players.
Yeah, so I think they weren't in season 1. That's pretty well documented, and they're just not in it. I mean, obviously, you know, the brilliant thing about having the approval of an organisation, you can still feature the race. You can't, you know, there's no way that's not being featured. But in terms of the origin story, I think the company were having a conversation about potentially going with a Formula 1 team, an individual team at the time, and then I think at the same time Netflix were looking at doing something and put it out to the market for who would like to pitch on this opportunity. And I think the timing's quite aligned perfectly at the time. And then I think the added addition that James had worked in the Formula 1 world and therefore had made it sort of more of an attractive partner, because there was a project that, you know, had won a BAFTA and done really well in the sport. So people were like, well, actually, you know what? He's already shown that he can deliver. So I think that obviously helped that initial thing. But it was a perfect storm. I won't say what team was, but there was a definite individual team that was working with us to say, right, well, we're going to do a season with. And then it was like, well, actually, we're going to do a season with everyone. Mm-hmm. And then that was when Netflix stepped in. And I think that was a big punt for Netflix at the time, because they weren't, you know, the Netflix that they are now, you know, in the way. They were still big, but they were still growing. And I think it was one of the first initial sort of attempts in that sports space. And I think, you know, this show has then sort of helped set the style and the tone for sports documentaries that have followed.
Yeah, I mean, it is a groundbreaker. What do you think is that magic element that there haven't been in other shows, and there are now in lots of other new shows that you're making?
I think never before seen areas. I think, you know, live TV has to certainly do one thing, just to tell a narrative in the moment and make it make sense, right? And they do a brilliant job at doing that. But essentially, a lot of that is presenter-led, and I've got to take you here to go there. And I think for us, it's able to go, well, what's going on over there? And pointing cameras in areas that have never been. And we touched on it earlier, you know, there's certain areas of the engine and things that you can't show. But it doesn't mean you can't be in that room following what that emotional feeling is for that person. So I think it's sort of understanding really, you know, the human nature of it, as we touched on earlier, but also like, you know, yeah, really documenting stuff that's never been captured in a way before. And it's not groundbreaking in the way that we do it. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel, but essentially it's just because it hadn't been done before, it was, you know, refreshing for people to do it. And it's opened up an audience in the US who had never really even come to the motorsport before in Formula 1, and it's allowed them to go, well, actually, wait a minute, these are the rock stars of motorsport. So, you know, that's helped there, because obviously they'd be watching on a time zone which wouldn't work, and, you know, so it's allowed them. I think a lot of people watch Drive to Survive now. I think the stats that, you know, the first time they watch the races via, you know, via Netflix, and they'll wait for that. So that's great for us, and long may it continue.
Thank you. Just at the back.
Hi, my name is Jared. My question is based around narrative. You say that you go into a show having a already existing narrative, and you follow certain athletes around the course of a season. How much do you prep in advance, and around such an unpredictable industry like sports. You could lose, win, athletes can get injured. What are you doing to change the narrative along the way and adapt to that?
I think sort of when we look at our shows and we prepare, I think the key thing is thinking that what would the story be without the sporting event, right? What would it be without the game? And then using the game as a sort of icing on top. And that is like, you know, you're looking at stories where is it 3 rookies and you want to follow them from the start position to the end? So, you know, you've let those horses out the gates and then you're going to follow them where they're going through the season? Or is there people that have got like a synergy between a narrative because of that, and there's a theme that you think, right, okay, that works because they're both going through grief at home, or they're going. So I think a lot of the times it's a loose plan, and as you follow a season or event, you know, it starts coming together. And then as you're moving through series and you're going to season 3 and 4, the shows evolve more because you understand, like, you know, this is what's going to be going on in this team or this event or this person. So you sort of event, you know, but when you're beginning out, you're starting to think, right, well, okay, what we try and stop by going, we don't care what the newspaper headlines, or not really newspaper headlines anymore, but what the you know, sports media are saying. What's our story? And I think that's the key thing, is like not having uber sports. Like, absolutely, I'm obsessed with Formula One, like, because then they're just going to be obsessed by the story that they think they already know. We want our teams to be sort of trying to work out what the story is themselves, and I think that allows those stories to have a theme at the beginning to follow, but essentially allow for, you know, a narrative to go that way, or whatever, and be able to, you know, track it. Did that answer? Yeah.
I guess also, is that like the sports side of things, like your career, you've done many different genres, but sport is like the main passion for you. Is it because of the unpredictability of it? Like you just don't know what might happen on that day.
Yeah, I think sports is. I think that's why people love sport, isn't it? And I think, you know, that's why sort of I am a football fan, and, you know, but I think it's a great, like, it's just there's nothing better than sort of a sporting event. I mean, the thing is that if I ever left box to box, I don't know what I'd do, because I get to go to all these amazing, amazing places without having to buy a ticket. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it allows you to take those skills that you learn on the non-sport stuff, and because the sports have, you know, it's only recently that they've allowed their doors open to a documentary or a sort of a series of this type. So, you know, we're really privileged with that, really.
Thanks. Just down here. Just down here, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, good evening. Happy New Year. We're still in January. It's so long this month. My name, Variety. I'm not probably the old one out in this room because I'm a comedian. And my question is for both of you. Do you think comedians nowadays, because I've been in comedy for 18 years, so high five. So do you think we are a heavy burden within sports in presenting, or are we a gift, and why? That includes America as well, by the way. So within sports.
I think comedy is great for it. I mean, I think you've got to look at the what NBC did around the Olympics. I mean, Snoop isn't a comedian, but there was comedy elements, right? And I think Kevin Hart and him and the way that watch along that they did just really opened it up to a wider audience. So I think there's definitely opportunities there, because I think that's what people want, essentially entertain, right? So I think that would be my first point of reference there, because we were around those guys at the Olympics, and I don't know if you saw him, Snoop in his sort of joppers and wearing, you know, the horse racing. But that had a comedy element. No one was thinking, oh, he's serious about this, right? So I think, yeah, comedy 100% has a place.
Do you think it'll work here? And on top of that, because I represent disability, being a pioneer, I've been one of the first, first Black British disabled comic. Do you think there's space for people like me to host and present within sports? Because I am a sports fan to an extent, but I could see there's a gap there, and I don't want to leave it to one of my inspirations like Adi Adeptane to just be doing all those jobs. He has a wonderful baby son and wife. He needs to take a break. Like, I can just let me have a little. You know what I mean? Let me have a little moment. So, you know. So what's your thoughts on that? You know, is there space? Is there, you know, because
I think the way in which, you know, most of the shows that we make are sort of athlete or documentary-led pieces. But, you know, as we're looking out there and thinking about how, you know, now the access is open, like, what else can we be doing in these worlds? I think, you know, comedy is definitely an area where we, you know, there's opportunity there for for more stuff, whether it be sort of, around an Olympics or a World Cup or European Championships, where there's that, I think last leg was a perfect example. Like, they did that thing, it's going on forever. You can't get, you can't not see it on your TV. So I think, absolutely, it's just an alternative look at sport is important, because it's not always just about the stories of the athletes. It's about what the fans and everybody around it want to say.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's adding. We talk about entertaining and bringing those stories to life, and it's bringing everyone together to make it fun, make it exciting. I go back to what goes on tour stays on tour, kind of some of the jokes and stuff that you have is what builds the teams, what brings them together. Yeah, so I agree.
Thank you.
Hello. I'll try and be quick as I can. I've got a lot to say. First of all, Pamela, you look very elegant and stylish, and it was a fantastic interview. Really, really enjoyed the interview.
Oh, thank you.
So my first questions are just advice from Warren, because you mentioned that you'd worked with Leona Lewis and you'd worked on Towie, and my background is journalistic, so I've written for different newspapers. But the subjects aren't necessarily sports related.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if you talked about interviewing, because you said you just want someone that's a good interviewer, I interviewed Charlene Spiteri, the lead singer of Texas, and I knew that she used to be a hairdresser, so I said, what would you do to my hair? And there was a lot of laughter in the room. She spent 10 minutes telling me how terrible my hair was, and saying that men don't really look after their hair as much as women. Anyway, and there was an interview with James Blunt in the Financial Times, and he said that if he could come back as an animal, he'd come back as an ant.
Right.
So I got a poster of him made as an ant, and I asked him if it was true that he wanted to be an ant, and he said yes. So I gave him this poster of, instead of an ant, it had his face on it, and he really liked it, by the way.
Yeah.
So, I just think that now, if I wanted to interview someone that's in sport, unfortunately, the Premier League, for example, their rules are that you have to have had written about sport before.
Right.
They won't recognise any work outside sport. Now, you were saying that having a good story is having a good story, and it shouldn't matter. You should be able to transfer those storytelling skills into another industry, but it's very difficult with the Premier League. And the last question I wanted to say, you talked about netball earlier. So one of the ideas that I had many years ago was to have a celebrity netball.
Yeah.
And I know that I tweeted Sophie Dahl, and she said, great idea, Bagsy, I'll be goalkeeper. For one of the actresses, I've just gone blank, she was in Goodness Gracious Me, and she plays netball. So you could have celebrity netball, like you have Celebrity MasterChef. It would make netball, it would widen its appeal, because it has, I'd like to see it in the Olympics one day, but I just think that was to find out if that's something that I could help with, to have a celebrity netball.
Celebrity netball, I think, look, there's a lot of, I was saying it earlier, there's I don't know if you've seen all these sort of like the Ballers League and the Kings League in football. There's definitely opportunity where they're taking, YouTubers, content creators, mixing them with ex-professionals, and they're creating a league which probably going to have more viewers than certain sort of high-end leagues. So I'm sure that, celebrity netball might have an opportunity, but that's probably more your field.
Yeah, no, I'm all over that, definitely. And it's been returned back, but it's about that creating, getting it out there, highlighting the sport, highlighting the personalities, the stories of the individual athletes. And there's so many, like we're talking about the synergies, there's so many synergies from the entertainment world to the sporting world to, if we can get everyone, I think, working together.
I think there's pure sport, which is the traditional sport, but then I think there's nothing wrong with having these hybrid sports that basically bring attention to the sport, because essentially that's essentially going to bring eyeballs onto whatever that is, whether it be football, netball, etc. for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Many moons ago, when I worked on F1, peripherally, we tried to do something not a million miles from your programme, but the major problem was archive footage costs. How the heck did you get past that?
Well, Netflix do the deal with Formula One, so that's it, really. I think the sort of opportunity there of opening up, in all of these sports, is the rights to the footage. I mean, that allows us to be able to tell the stories on the field of play, whether it be a track etc. So I think, you know, at that deal stage, it's sort of imperative that you've got, you know, access to whatever that sport is, and you can tell it. And that's not always easy, because obviously some sports are one company like F1, others are multiple companies, multiple organisations. Tennis, for example, golf, for example, you know, there's many, many different majors, Grand Slams, and each one individually has their own tariff and their own thing. So I think it's all about being able to bring them all together to see the vision of the end goal. And if they can see that, then they'll all buy in. But yeah, it's not cheap. But you know, I think that's, you know, we'll leave that to the broadcaster to do that side of the deal making.
Thank you. Oh, well, that's all the questions. Good work, team. Nice. Thank you, Warren.